I'm Swedish by birth. Anyone know Sweden? Anyone been to Sweden? No, I know. Northern Europe, we have about 9 million people in Sweden. And my standard joke that I told Deepa a little bit earlier today as well is that there's about 9 million people in Bandra where I live. And for a Swede, when I came to India for the first time, the first shock that hit me was the second that I stepped out of the Mumbai International Airport. In the middle of the night, there are people everywhere. Everywhere. And so many of them that usually daytime you don't see that many people in the country. So you get this, okay, what is this and what am I doing? And I spent 1 year with Bellincars as an exchange student. I would say one of the best years of my life. And I learned an incredible amount during that year. You know, one of the things, and why I'm telling this story, is we tend to live in bubbles as people. We tend to have a certain view of what the world looks like to us. And any time that you get a new experience that puts you outside of that bubble, your worldview widens. That's an incredibly important thing for you to remember in the next 2 years. The way that you look at the world today and the way that you look at the world in 2 years' time should not be the same. Because you should have gained so much of experience during these 2 years, learned so much from your professors and teachers and mentors up here, from each other in the room, and hopefully some from the books that you study as well, right? And the shifting of those worldviews is, I think, the most important thing that I learned in India. It took me out from this small country with 9 million people that is doing great, but that is very secluded from the rest of the world, that is very, living in its bubble. The number one thing that I look for in our new graduates that we hire to Accenture, and we hire a fair amount of them. I think we're going to hire 60,000 people this year, right? Is that the ability to take yourself and expand your worldview. To be able to say, well, this is what I am today, and then grow by your experiences, learn from those experiences, and learn to change your opinions and be open to that. If you do that well during the next 2 years, you're going to have come a long way down that path. If you, on the other hand, sit and say, well, this is the truth, I know the truth, and here's what it looks like, nothing's going to change that. You're going to come out to a world where you're finding that the world is changing like this. I, on a daily basis today, speak with at least people from 15 to 20 countries. My team, people who report to me, sit in India, Philippines, China, US, used to be Spain, not Spain anymore. And on a daily basis, we service people for Accenture in 100 countries. Every day, we have to understand what those cultures look like, how they operate, why are they different. We have to accept that they are different, and we have to learn how to work with them. It is not always easy. I know for a fact that when I get off the phone with our China team, and they say, yes, Jacob, we understand exactly what we're going to do over the next 2 weeks. If I don't check in with them 2 days later and see, did you really understand? 2 weeks later, we're going to have the exact same conversation again. And then they're going to say, yes, Jacob, you understand exactly what it is that you want from us. We all have those quirks, right? And it's not saying that there's something bad with the Chinese because of that. It is just that part of their culture is that they're not going to say no to you. They're not going to say no. It's kind of like when I go out on the street in Mumbai and I ask for something and the person says, "Acha." You know what, let me explain that one more time. And see how that works. Or you know what, let me get my wife and she can explain it in Hindi. And when I came to Bellingcars, and what I experienced at Bellingcars was the first time that I had to see and live and really be with people from a different culture. In this case, India, right? And I had to learn. There were some things that there's some things that you really cope easily with a new culture. There's some things that takes time to get used to in a new culture. There will be certain things in other people from other countries that you will not be okay with. That's okay. On a number of occasions, I've said, I understand that that's the culture here. I will not do that. But I try to, at least, to always show respect towards that, to any culture. I learned that in Bellingcars. And I learned that when I got in touch with students like you for the first time here in India. Then I actually, when I graduated from Bellingcars, I had the fortune of being picked up by a US company. You heard from my LinkedIn profile. I was with SHRM, which is Strategic Human Resource Management. I was looking after our international education programs. And suddenly I got to see what education looks like in 150 countries across the world. And how different education is in all of those different countries. Right? There's a very distinct, here's a European way of going to business school. There's a very distinct, here's an Indian way of going to business school. And there's a very distinct American way of going to business school. Right? And they, to a large extent, they reflect the cultures that we're in. Right? In India, it's a lot more high touch. You get a lot more face time with your professors. You spend a lot more time together. Right? In Sweden, you get a lot less face time. It's 4 or 5 lectures a week, maximum. And if anyone here thinks that you're going to get 4 or 5 lectures a week here, I think they're sadly mistaken, right? In the US, everything is case-based. Everything is a case study. Everything is application. Right? And all of those have different strengths and weaknesses in the systems. There's not one right system, even though the Americans would like to think so. It's all strengths and weaknesses. What I find in the Indian system is people who graduate and who hire from India, they know the theory like this every time. I ask a graduate from Bellingcar to summarize Cotter on marketing in 10 minutes. Right? When you come to a Swedish school instead, the MBA student is going to be, well, Cotter, you know what, I know where to find that. I'll come back to you, and I'll figure it out. But what you get back is an analysis of Cotter's work, not a repetition of Cotter's work. That takes a little bit longer because they don't remember it. An American person from a business school, he'll say, well, here's how it's applied. Right? Always. And be very like, this is what the process works like, here's how it's happening in the marketplace today, and therefore here's how it should be done. My challenge to you is, during the next 2 years, pick the best from the 3. Learn the theory like you do in India. Learn it inside out. There is nothing like being able to have that mental mind in your head about academic theories. A lot of your seniors and people who are out in the workplace are going to come back to you and say things like, well, I don't really use what I learned in business school and my day-to-day job.